Good morning. It's great to be here. My name is Charles Payne. For those who don't know, I have a show on Fox Business every day. It's called Making Money with Charles Payne, so no pressure right there. Although I do feel a lot better after November 8th, 6th, whatever the hell the election was, right? I also have my own research firm that Todd was talking about going on 40 years. And then I've written 3 books. My most recent book is called Unbreakable Investor. If you go to unbreakableinvestor.com, you can get a free copy. It really is phenomenal. All my books and everything I do is geared toward helping people become self-directed investors in the stock market. In my book, I wrote about the roaring 20s, right? The roaring 2020s, like the roaring 1920s. And it's ironic because on Friday, JP Morgan came out. They've been pretty negative on the market, but now they're positive. Morgan Stanley, which had been negative on the market, is now positive. Everyone on Wall Street starting to come around a little bit, but their theme was the roaring 20s. Well, my book was out October of last year with an entire chapter in the roaring 20s. But it's interesting because as time has gone by, I'm thinking that might have been the wrong analogy. I'm thinking more like a new Gilded Age. Let's think about the first Gilded Age. When you hear the Gilded Age, it's sort of negative connotations, right? Because you think about what the robber barons, those kind of folks. So the Gilded Age, known for rapid industrialization, economic growth, and political corruption. Sounds familiar, right? Issues, race, ethnicity, immigration, American Indians, political corruption, monetary policy. Again, sounds very, very familiar to what we're going through now. Notable figures, J.D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Cornelius Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan. Well, we've got the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos today. Again, the similarities are absolutely eerie. And then political activism, unions, middle-class reform, grassroots reform. And so I started to really look into this and started to make these parallels almost, and again, the first thing you think of are the robber barons, right? These greedy SOBs who made all of the money. And that's the way it's still portrayed, particularly in movies. I think there was a TV series out recently. I watched half an episode. The actors were good, but again, it was one of these things that was really negative and wasn't telling a true historical story. What was really compelling about it is that the Gilded Age began like in 1870. We had 2 panics in the time of the Gilded Age. Now, in the 1800s, there were 4 panics. They were so economically devastating that they decided if we ever have an economic situation like this again, we won't call it a panic. Let's call it a depression. Of course, then we had the Great Depression. But we had these economic panics that were absolutely phenomenal. What you see in both of these, what they have in common, banks and Wall Street. Banks and Wall Street imploded, the country goes down, but it was such an amazing period of time that we didn't stay down, right? Again, this was all part and parcel of the growth. The railroads came in, the second industrial revolution, right? This is where we really started to gain traction. We were way behind everyone, particularly Great Britain, but we started to gain traction. Of course, anywhere there's excitement, there's going to be over speculation, and that's what these were mostly about. And so with that as a backdrop, we still ended up having this amazing period, the Gilded Age. So what happened with these so-called robber barons? What did they create? Well, if you look down here, you can't really see the arrow, it's covered by a plant, but right around 1870, production workers in manufacturing, their hourly wages began to go up after being flat forever. I mean, we're an agrarian society. Most people in America up to this point live and died by the crop. If the crop failed, you were in trouble. If you made it, you lived to the next season. This was the beginning of modern America. This was the beginning of shared prosperity. And you can see right here, again, it absolutely exploded. So the robber barons couldn't have been that bad if they triggered something like this. We're not talking about a short-term blip. We're talking about a 100-year move that were able to create people to make money, to send their kids to college, to have discretionary money, discretionary spending. Of course, the railroad was the main thing that got all of this done, the Intercontinental Railroad. And you think the parallels now, obviously, the internet to the AI and to other things, that's the modern day version of the Intercontinental Railroad. So the parallels, again, are absolutely mind-boggling. So the second industrial revolution, we had steel, petroleum, refinery, internal combustion, synthetic materials. By the way, this was called the technology revolution. in the 1800s. This was called the technology revolution. And so we're in the fourth industrial revolution, another technology revolution, in the midst of people doing extraordinarily well. The birth of American-style consumerism. So annual wages from 1880 to 1890 went up 59%. Again, people never had this kind of money before. They never made money. They lived and made sure, that, hey, if the crop was good, you had maybe a little extra, you sell some seeds or something, but never this kind of prosperity. It didn't exist. First time in history, not American history, the first time in history. Again, remember, everyone in Europe, all those nations were far ahead of us. We started to supersede Europe and become the preeminent country in America with the Gilded Age. The urbanization of America, can't keep them down on the farm. Rapid development of cities, towns, again, very exciting things. Of course, that allowed for the influx of legal immigration, of immigration. And then let's talk about the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, because to me, this was a seminal moment. This is also known as the White City. They created an entire city for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. This was, in my mind, the official introduction of American-style consumerism. It debuted the first skyscraper, I think it was 5 stories tall, the Ferris wheel, and a whole lot of other amazing things. But what was the most amazing about it was that people had discretionary income. They had extra money to go on the Ferris wheel. They introduced Cracker Jacks, Aunt Jemima, the zipper, right, and the chewing gum, the automatic dishwasher, Pabst Blue Ribbon, the electric light bulb, electric chairs, electric sidewalks, the early versions of the fax machine, electric irons, sewing machines, laundry machines, the first moving pictures. Could you imagine living in those days and going to this and seeing all of this stuff for the first time? How excited was life? How exciting did it must feel if you were in this environment? And again, this is not about robber barons. This is about every person in America saying, golly, look how amazing our future is. Look at all of these amazing things we couldn't even have thought about or fathomed just years earlier. Another thing that we had in this period, this green dotted area right here, we actually had surpluses. Our government ran surpluses, believe it or not. I know it sounds weird these days. 15 and 20 years we ran surpluses in this country. This is before income tax, before the Federal Reserve, right? It was absolutely amazing. We ran these surpluses and we did extraordinarily well until World War I. There was fiscal discipline. There wasn't a lot of special interest. And the reason I'm bringing this up is very important because, of course, we know that there's a lot of talk about using tariffs and things like that, and there's a lot of pushback on that, or the idea of having a disciplined government. But we've had disciplined governments in the past, and America enjoyed unknown prosperity. It wasn't a prosperous period. It was unknown prosperity to the history of mankind. Now, here's my problem with it right now. You guys remember the movie Benjamin Button? So there's a saying, right, that history repeats itself. When you think of the saying history repeats itself, you think of it as a clock. Okay, this happened. Oh man, I remember something just like this happening and it happens again. I remember something like this happening and it happens again. Unfortunately, this version, the current version of the Gilded Age, is almost like a Benjamin Button movie. In other words, we're getting to that same place in the Gilded Age, but we're going backwards. Workers are now getting a smaller piece of the pie. Workers have less opportunities. Big corporations and big government have taken almost all of the resources. So we're at the Gilded Age, but the clock isn't going this way. The clock is going the other way. And it's not just in America. You know, this year, 50 democracies had elections, and for the first time in history, the incumbent lost every single one of them. People are fed up all around the world, particularly in industrialized nations, because their prosperity has been hijacked. It's been taken away from them. They've been offered crumbs and massive amounts of debt. And so we're at the Gilded Age, but we're going in the wrong direction. So let's fast forward that to how it's impacted us more recently. When President Biden took office, the first thing he pushed through was that $1.9 trillion COVID thing. It was the most unnecessary gift we ever got as a society. So this chart right here is household debt service payments to disposable income. So this is how much you had to pay versus your income. In other words, we were at a record low amount that our monthly bills cost us versus what we were earning. We did not need this gift as a nation. We did not need this gift as a society. And by the way, this 1.9 trillion was coming on the heels of 600 billion that Trump had pushed through. Now that 600 billion was purely political. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell made sure it happened after the election. That was a dirty thing to do, but he did it. I mean, woo. So anyway, 600 billion, 1.9 trillion, all of this money gushing into the economy, and guess what happens? What's the definition of inflation 101? Too much money chasing too few goods. In the meantime, look who benefited the most. Corporations, already making gobs of money. Well, guess what? They only made more. Profit margins right now have never been this high, and this high for this long. Of course you got a record stock market. Of course you do. Every time I tell people, I say the fix is in. You are nuts not to be in the stock market. The fix is in. Get a piece of the action before the whole damn thing implodes. And who knows when that will be, because after every crisis, they retinker it and make it better for them. Remember before the internet Black Friday? I used to feel sorry for those security guards. I mean, and I hate to say it, but every year, like 2 or 3 died, trampled. Poor people, stuffed with turkey, running in the damn mall to give away all their money, running people over. Can't wait to give rich people their money. It's trickle up. The government knows this. Do you think Biden was trying to help anyone with those stimmy checks? So, this report is phenomenal. Poor and middle class spend down the fastest. We all have what they call a propensity to consume, right? An NPC. Poor and middle class obviously have a greater propensity to consume. I mean, it's like hitting the lottery. If you never had money before, you're going to spend it. So as soon as they got the stimmy, I don't know if you guys went to the mall on stimmy day. I did. It was rough. So as soon as they got the money, they spent it. And then the rich also, for the most part, I'm not talking the wealthy, but the rich, they also spend. Right now, the rich are, the top 20% are doing 40% of the consumption. So they also spend. All of this money starts to make its way toward the top 1%. Again, this is from Stanford University. But this was done deliberately, to line the pockets of the ultra wealthy. America did not need it. It did not help us. It made a lot of people lazier. It made a lot of people go out and spend money they couldn't afford. It was all designed, and for me, the toughest part of this, it was the despicable part of this, is that it was done deliberately. It was sold as a package of compassion when in fact it was the exact opposite. They knew from the very moment they put this in place, ultimately what it was really for. And that was to line the pockets of the 1%. So what do we do? The money came out. Here's initially, you had all of this cash. And again, as soon as it came out, by the way, I was so crazy because they were always talking about excess savings. Like these economists, they would come on my show, these big Wall Street economists. Oh man, everything's great. We have excess savings of $2.5 trillion. I was so confused. I hate to tell you, I'd never heard that term before. When did inflation jump? The day that those stimmy checks went out is when inflation began to jump, and it never stopped jumping. And this is one thing I hate about the financial media and media in general. This chart on here on the left is what they use to express inflation. This is the rate of growth of inflation, right? And at one point, inflation grew 1.9% year over year. Again, this hadn't happened in over 4 decades. I think a lot of economists didn't think it was possible for this to happen again. Debt-driven prosperity. Since 2009, our debt is up 200%. GDP is up 200%. The S&P 500 is up 750%. I keep saying the fix is in. The fix is in. Again, this is the stock market versus median hourly wages. This is how much more the stock market has grown faster than the average wage in this country. You can see why people are upset. I'm really shocked that we don't have people in the streets with pitchforks and torches. And this is happening in almost every Western nation. That's why young people don't have kids anymore. They don't see a future for their kids in this kind of world. And I just hope, because the establishment is the establishment, and it exists all over the world the same way, they have extraordinary power. They're not going to just, let this go by, these election victories, whether it's in France, whether it's in Italy, whether it's in America. They will try their best to derail the notion of hope that most people are feeling right now. So, here comes the part that I love. President Trump and President McKinley, the parallels are mind-boggling. You guys are going to learn over time, because other people are going to pick up on this, how important it is to understand what happened with McKinley. McKinley became the president in 1896 and created a system that lasted for 36 years of prosperity. By the way, the Republican Party won every election except 2 during that time. And one of them, they split the party in half. What was he about? He believed in the development state, export-led industrialization, protectionism wall. Listen, he wanted to protect American and American businesses. And I love this part. He got to work after Election Day rather than awaiting inauguration. Sounds like someone we know. And within a year, he started to coordinate things. I love this part too. He created what was called the fourth political system. The fourth political system. It was a new GOP. He took the established GOP. There was a party called the Greenback Party. He brought them in. There was the Populist Party. He brought them in. Think about what Trump did in this last election. He brought in people that had never voted Republican in their lives. The same thing that McKinley did. McKinley was focused on regulations. There were too many. He said, let's stay on gold, not go on silver. He used tariffs. He went after corruption in politics. He went after immigration. The parallels are mind-boggling. So in closing, I just want to say, I'm extraordinarily excited about where we are right now. I think we can reverse that Benjamin Button part of the Gilded Age, turn it back around, and have another system at 1896. And I really believe not just the next 4 years, but the next 2 or 3 decades could be amazing for America. Thank you very much.
Charles Payne, everybody. Charles Payne.